Hi, everyone. My name is Lana. I'm a real estate agent in California, licensed real estate agent. And today we're talking about real estate and why do we need to have ADU, additional dwelling unit. Everybody knows that California has shortage of houses, especially right now, single family in high demand. And we'll discuss how can you increase your equity and can you solve this problem with shortage of houses. Okay, and everybody knows right now single family houses in huge demand, and condominiums prices and demand for condominiums going down. And right now we can discuss how can you increase your equity and how can you build more houses. Okay, so let me introduce Alessia. Alessia, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Lana, pleasure to be here. My name is Alessia and I run a company that is called Home WIP or Home Work in Progress. We help people start on their construction projects and grow their home equity. And one of the things that helps these days add value to the property is, of course, as Lana mentioned, accessory dwelling units. And this is something that is very new to the state of California. It has been around in Los Angeles actually for some time, and it has seen a huge increase in permits for accessory dwelling units. Exactly because of the reasons that Lana just mentioned, because it is an incredibly easy way to add space. And now that the whole state is supporting it on the legal level, most of the cities have to abide by the state rules, and they have started doing it already. The impact fees are less, the parking requirements have been decreased, the setbacks have been taken under control, so to speak, and the permits itself should be turned around within 60 days, which is like a huge deal for anyone who knows anything about construction. And I should probably share the screen with the drawing that I have for accessory dwelling units so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Here we are. So this is how you should look at your house right now. If you already own single family home, you can now turn it into a triplex, basically by adding an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit. What that means is that you can add either a detached or attached unit, and you can convert part of an existing main house. It might be an attached garage, it might be a basement, it might be a completely separate part of your house. But this gives you an opportunity to use it in a very flexible way as a rental, as a place where your adult kids can stay when they come home. Some people use it as a home office these days. So the flexibility of this solution is incredible. And if you have not bought the single family home yet, people have been known to use it to make it easier to pay off mortgages, because you literally subdivide the main house into separate units and this way offset your mortgage payments. I think I have mentioned that we have seen the impact of friendly regulations in big numbers, but this is an example of two houses in Palo Alto actually. One of them is smaller in square footage, but does have an ADU. And the result, when it was sold for a higher amount of dollars per square foot than the bigger house without an ADU. And I think this is something that kind of shapes the way you look at the whole accessory dwelling unit movement in California. And also shows, and that's what we do for our clients. That's actually an example with a property in Palo Alto, where we have seen the current value is just under 2 million. But if we were to add an accessory dwelling unit, we were looking at detached variant in that particular case. The value of the property will raise by almost 600. So even if we spend 300,000 on this unit, because here we were looking at about 1,000 square feet house, you will still have some additional value that you've created by adding this space. Yeah, I don't think we want to go into too much details, just to kind of a quick overview that there are detached, attached, and junior, and every piece of it has its own little details that you have to be aware of. And access to the property matters these days a lot, because there's a lot of new construction methods going into the market. And a good example is not just modular unit. There are new container type homes that look beautiful, but they need a huge access for the crane. And also there are 3D units that can be put on the property. And that's of course much quicker than traditional stick and build construction. So that's why it's important to think about this sort of things. And for the attached units, there are different things in play, because you have to think about sound insulation from the main house, and also about the flow, like how people get to that unit. This is something the junior ADU and in general repurposing existing space is like my I like this sort of projects because they make efficient use of the existing space, and that's the least expensive way to kind of add rental income to the already existing property. And here is an example of how you could think about it, because you can see that there were 3 bedrooms here that were initially used by the family for the kids. And then when the kids move out and there is just parents who occasionally need a guest room, and it's enough of that space in that part of the house, you could literally subdivide the house into 2 parts and rent out the second part as a secondary unit as a passive as an additional income opportunity. And one more trend that we're seeing is the co-living. When you have a house that can be remodeled in such way that makes co-living possible. And so these are the kind of things that Home works with. We work with different builders. We start with matching the site and the particular situation for the homeowner, and then go from there. I don't know, Lana, if you have any particular questions that you want to ask.
First question, of course, about money. How much does it cost to build, and how long does it take? What about permits?
Well, as I mentioned, let's start with permits, because officially permits are supposed to be given within 60 days from the time that the town receives the complete application.
In any cities, it doesn't matter? Everywhere?
It's across California, with one little caveat. Unfortunately, the current situation with COVID has given everyone an excuse. So unfortunately, an excuse not to do things in time. So the 60-day limit exists, but it's not enforced right now, even though the cities are trying to kind of make it as friendly as possible. And again, there are cities that are very much on top of this game, and like San Jose, for example, is very friendly towards accessory dwelling units. And then there are also other cities that are more in the so-called NIMBY, not in my backyard move. And of course, in those kind of cities, it might take longer to get a permit, even with all this state support behind us. Going to the question of money. I actually think I do have a slide on it. Let me see if I can find it quickly, because what people make a mistake of comparing the square footage for the main house to the square footage of the accessory dwelling unit, and it's a very wrong type of thinking, because the accessory dwelling unit is still a separate house if we are talking about detached ADU. And I know that you can build one, definitely, 500 square foot ADU for 200,000, which kind of sounds like a big amount of money. But let me show you why this number is so big. And I think it will help kind of shape the thinking behind how you evaluate the square footage. So when you're talking about a big house and when you're talking about the small house, we are talking the same type of utilities, the same type of engineering that a house takes. And it doesn't matter whether it's big or small. But when you look at the numbers and the cost of utilities is the same across the square footage, the amount of money it adds on to the cost of square foot is hugely different. And that's why it's important to compare costs one accessory dwelling unit built to another accessory dwelling unit, and not to the square footage to something that somebody built elsewhere. So that's a very important note. Another thing that is very valuable, and I think that's where you started off, Lana, it's about home equity growth. So as soon as you put the money into the build of the ADU, your property grows by this at least the same amount, and sometimes, as I've shown in the example, sometimes more. So even if it seems like a very big amount of money, it still makes sense if you look at it long term. So that's, I guess, a long answer to that question. But for the price range, I've seen prices starting from 100 for garage conversion, all the way to 400 for something like 1200 square footage. And then also I've seen ADUs that were built as a kind of pet project that cost close to 1 million. So as usual, it's within whatever homeowner wants. And that's the kind of restrictions where we work.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And what about addresses? Do you get different address for this ADU?
Yes, yeah, that's actually in the legislation as well, that you do get kind of a letter to the address to make sure that that's the separate dwelling.
Mm-hmm. And is it easy to increase price for house if you have ADU? Yes, because we sell some houses with ADU, and really demand is huge because it's additional income, first of all, additional space, and you build equity, of course, because you increase square footage, and then you can rent out.
Yeah, as I've mentioned, people do use it to offset their mortgage payments, and that's a nice way to it's like buy insurance in a way, right? So that you can always make sure that your mortgage will be paid, whatever happens in the job market. And then also I've seen a new trend where, for example, not couples, not kids and parents, but two friends buy the property together. And again, having this ADU as a separate space makes it possible for every person in that deal have their own space.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I like this idea.
yeah. I've seen it a lot actually in the Northern California.
Okay, and where do you build? Only in Northern California or everywhere in California?
Well, we project manage, so it doesn't matter for us where the homeowner is, as long as he or she is within the state of California. Our builders build everywhere. Yeah. Okay. So we do have a couple of builders in LA who are very active with innovative construction methods. Mm-hmm. And of course, we work with different builders in the Bay Area.
Oh, nice. If it doesn't matter where, so people can build anywhere in California. For example, especially in high-end areas, it's very important to have extra space.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about it before, that in some, it makes sense in
high-end
area, well, I wouldn't say high-end, but in the areas where the space is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course, if there is lots of land around, then it doesn't make sense to build what they call infill middle housing. That makes sense only in the areas where there is a lot of people who need a lot of housing here.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it helps solve problem with house shortage in California.
True, and also these are units, and I think there's another trend that we should mention, because this is the trend towards more compact homes. Because we have seen till now it was more of a growth, because I think we started seeing in the last 20 years it has grown from 2000 to 2700 square footage for a house as an average across the US. But now, because of the costs of construction, people are starting to look at these smaller units, and these accessory dwelling units builders can actually be used to build for your main house as well. So that's again something that not many people can think about.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little trick to use if somebody wants to build new and start their own family compound in a very sensible way.
Mm-hmm. And even if it's three houses on the same land, it's all of them still single family residence. It's not multifamily.
No.
Mm-hmm. Because why it's important? Everybody knows then that since 2020, yes, 2020, it's the rent control in California. And if people have triplex, because we can consider free houses as like triplex, and then people, unfortunately, under rent control. But in this case, you're not under rent control because all of them are separate houses, and you can increase rent. You can do whatever you want. Is it true?